I came face to face with my worst nightmare not long ago. Two imposters pretending to be HOA officers tried to evict us and even pointed a gun at my 82-year-old grandfather. Their excuse, they claimed there was some kind of emergency order to make us leave. The only emergency that day, though, was how quickly they landed in handcuffs. Let me take it from the start. My name is Cal Reynolds, and this all began because my grandpa's acre of land is the only plot in the entire subdivision that still has real, towering trees. We live in Creekwood Estates, North Carolina. The kind of trees that were standing here long before vinyl fencing, cul-de-sacs, and cloned mailboxes showed up. Betty Brown, who happens to be the HOA president, despises those trees, calls them a safety issue. I call her Karen, though never to her face. Grandpa Jack just refers to her as that woman. He fought in Vietnam. He understands hazards better than most, and a woman in a golf cart was not one of them, or so we thought. It started on a Tuesday morning. I walked out to grab the mail and stopped cold. Our mailbox wasn't just dented, it was obliterated. The post was bent clean over, the box itself flattened like a crushed soda can. Letters scattered into the ditch, some torn open. My jaw tightened immediately. This wasn't the result of a careless driver clipping the box. The tire marks dug into the soft shoulder told the truth. Somebody pulled over, got out, and smashed it deliberately, probably with a hammer or something heavy. I bent down and picked up one of the ruined envelopes. It was addressed to Grandpa from the VA, ripped straight down the center. My stomach dropped, then heat surged up my spine. That was the line for me. You don't mess with a man's mail. You especially don't mess with a veteran's mail. I walked back to the porch with the mangled letters still in my hands. Grandpa Jack sat there in his rocking chair, cleaning an old set of binoculars. His body might move slower these days, but his eyes don't miss a thing. He caught the look on my face, then noticed the shredded mail. Without speaking, he slowly set the binoculars aside and turned his gaze toward the road. His jaw was like granite. I could see the calculation in his expression. He wasn't focused on the destroyed mailbox. He was already plotting the move after this one. He always thought several steps ahead. They're getting bold, I muttered. He gave a short nod. People act bold when they think no one's watching, he said, his voice low and steady. Then he pushed himself to his feet, stiff at the knees, and came over. He picked up a piece of the torn letter, looked at it, then looked back down the road. Federal offense, he said flatly. Not a question, a statement. I know, I answered. I'll call the postal inspector. He nodded once more. Good. Get a name, get a file number, get a direct line. No switchboards. That was Grandpa. Always deliberate, always exact. While I was on the phone with the inspection service, he disappeared into the garage. I heard the ring of metal. Minutes later, he came out carrying a thick steel post, twice as heavy as the old one. He had a sack of concrete mix in one hand, a shovel in the other. Without a word, he started digging a new hole beside the wrecked post. This one went deeper. He was 82 years old, but he dug that hole like a man half his age. Stubborn didn't even begin to describe him. The agent on the phone, a man named Martinez, took it seriously. Tampering with and destroying mail, especially when it looked targeted, was something they cared about. I gave him Betty Brown's name. I explained the ongoing fight over our land, how she wanted to buy it out for the HOA so they could pave over the oaks and throw in a community pickleball court, pickleballed over my grandpa's trees. Martinez told me to document everything, take photos, keep a log. He mentioned he was already working another case in our county and could swing by soon if needed. As I hung up, movement caught my eye. Black SUV rolled slowly down our street. It slowed to a crawl right in front of our house, then picked up speed again. No license plate, just a dealer's frame with nothing in it. A chill slid down my spine. It's one thing to read Betty's petty threats in a newsletter. It's something else entirely to see a blacked-out SUV with no plate circling your home. Window slid down, the phone pointed at me, then at the house. The driver grinned, but it was humorless. Nice mailbox, he said flatly. The SUV idled long enough for the exhaust to hang in the air, then rolled off. My skin prickled. Grandpa didn't look up from his work. Another shovel of dirt went into the hole. They want you to flinch, he muttered. Don't. I studied him, still digging one scoop of dirt at a time. He understood exactly what this was. It wasn't vandalism anymore. It was a message. And that SUV, it's the exclamation point. They weren't just trying to irritate us anymore. They wanted us rattled, unsettled. I glanced at Grandpa, his back straight, his hands steady as he worked, and I knew, without a doubt, they had chosen the wrong family. This was our home, our ground, and we weren't leaving. The new hole was nearly 3 feet deep now. Grandpa wasn't half doing it. He was setting a foundation, both literal and symbolic. His message was clear: whatever they did, we would counter. Ours would be stronger, sharper, legal, and final. The sun was dropping, throwing long shadows from the very oak trees Betty despised. The post was ready for concrete, looking less like a mailbox and more like a barrier, and staring at it, I realized something. This was only the beginning. The battle for this single acre was about to escalate. The question was, how far would they push, and what more did Grandpa have tucked away? He wiped sweat from his brow with a gloved hand, looked at me and said calmly, "Cal, get the security cameras." The good ones. He'd already anticipated this. He'd been ready. As I walked inside, I wondered what else he'd prepared for. The SUV had been no accident. It was a warning, a promise of worse ahead. Soon those black SUVs were constant. 2 of them, always parked with a perfect view of our driveway. No plates. Sometimes they trailed me to the store, hanging back 3 or 4 car lengths. Textbook intimidation make you feel stripped of privacy, stripped of safety, but it backfired. It didn't scare me, it pissed me off. Grandpa Jack, though, he found it almost funny. Called them the welcoming committee. He'd sit on the porch raising that slow, mocking wave, the kind you give to a neighbor you tolerate but don't like. It drove them nuts. You could almost feel their frustration spill out. That's when I bought a telephoto lens. I started logging everything: photos, times, durations, directions, a harassment file, just like Inspector Martinez had instructed. Always the same 2 guys, big broad-shouldered types who looked like they peaked in high school football and never let it go. Their cheap polo shirts had an embroidered logo and eagle gripping a gavel, supposedly Creekwood Estates Compliance and Safety Board. Betty's invention. A fake board, no registration, no state recognition, just a title to give her enforcers weight. One night, Grandpa and I were mounting cameras, not doorbell toys, real hardware, commercial-grade motion-sensing infrared. He'd bought them years ago, just in case. He always said his just in case was never ordinary. As we fixed one under the porch eaves, an SUV pulled up, passenger window rolled down, thick-necked guy, permanent scowl, eyes locked on us. He wanted to be seen, he wanted us uneasy. Grandpa didn't give him the satisfaction. He kept tightening. "A bracket, 3/8 wrench, Cal," he said, steady as ever. I handed it over, the man's stare burning into me. "Ugly feeling. They're watching us," I muttered. Grandpa only grunted. "Good. Let them. Hiding looks guilty." He fed the wire through the hole we drilled. Back in Vietnam, we spent weeks watching, learned more that way than fighting. You pick up habits, patterns. Everyone gets sloppy. Eventually, then his eyes cut to me sharp hard. "They think this is simple. They think scaring an old man and his grandson is a win. They don't know what they walked into." He was right. Paid with our own HOA dues, those thugs thought. Sitting there was enough. Big mistake. Their first of many. We finished the system. One on the porch, one on the garage covering the drive, another on an oak tree out back, surveying the whole property line, all tied to a DVR in my office. Live monitoring, phone access. That night, when the SUVs finally pulled out, Grandpa and I sat in the kitchen. His tea steaming, my laptop glowing with perfect, crisp footage. "We've got proof now," I said. "Every move they make." Grandpa sipped slow. "Good now. Theo neighbor, the retired engineer with more antennas than sense. Amateur radio junkie. Eccentric but decent. And Betty's nemesis. She slapped him with fines for his eyesores." "What about Theo?" I asked. "Theo's got skills. He knows networks, radios, probably bounce a signal off the moon if he felt like it. Talk to him tomorrow. Don't ask for help. Just tell to him the story. See what he offers." Grandpa's chessboard mind at work again. He wasn't just defending, he was recruiting. Allies, anyone fed up with Betty's rule. That night, lying in bed, I replayed his words. Bullies depend on fear and isolation. But with Theo, the isolation was cracking and fear. They had no clue who they were facing. They saw a tired veteran and his grandson. What they missed was a man who'd endured worse than this and a grandson ready to fight for his blood and his land. The SUVs had exposed themselves. That was their gift. We knew their faces now, and we had a plan. The game was shifting. They thought they were the hunters. They were about to learn they were prey. Their next move came fast: kill our power and water. It was a Thursday, just past 10. I was at my desk reviewing camera logs. SUVs had done their same act. Park, stare, leave, routine. My screen, my lamp, my clock dead. The room drowned in black. My first thought: outage. I yanked out my phone. Blinding white light cut the dark. Checked the utility map, no outages. None. I went to the window. Every other house blazing. Streetlights on. Betty's overdone landscape lights glowing too. Doors down. Just us. Swallowed in shadow. Breaker box in the garage, every switch still on. I toggled the main, nothing. Silence, and then Grandpa's footsteps. Slow, certain. He came down the hall with an old kerosene lamp. Its flame dancing. Looked like something out of another century. "Check the water," he said evenly. I turned the kitchen faucet. A cough. Then air. Then nothing. Dry. "No water," I said. Tight in the chest. This wasn't nuisance. This was escalation. Utilities cut meant danger. Grandpa was 82. He needed warmth. He needed water. "Lines are cut at the street," he said. Certain. He set the lamp on the table. Its flicker painted his face like a general sketching strategy. "They want panic. They want us to crack. Emergency. Eviction. Abandonment. That's their play. Classic dirty tactic. Build a crisis. Seize the opening." Rage surged in me, sharp and burning. I shoved it down. Panic was their weapon. Calm was ours. "I'll call utilities." And the sheriff's good grandpa said, do it from your cell outside, never assume they aren't listening. He was right again. If they were bold enough to cut us off, they were bold enough to eavesdrop. Then he opened a pantry I hadn't even known existed, pulled out 2 more kerosene lamps, lit them both, set a massive insulated cooler on the counter already, filled with water. He'd filled it that afternoon. He'd been expecting this, he'd seen it coming, said utilities were the next target. I blinked at him. How could you know? His thin smile cut through the lamplight. Patterns never change first. They test you with petty damage to the mailbox. Then they rattle your nerves, the SUVs, after that. They go for survival, cut the wires, shut the valves. Standard intimidation. The night outside felt colder than before. Gravel popped underfoot. Oak branches creaked. My breath hung pale. In the dark, phone light off, ears straining. A shovel scraped backyard. My whisper drew Grandpa's lamp dark. We slipped outside, wall to wall, heart hammering like a war drum, stars sharp and cold, our house's glow gone. My calls went out quick, power, water, skeptics, until I gave them the police report number, then urgency, cruise en route, but hours away. Sheriff's line next, dispatcher indifferent, until I dropped the SUV harassment and postal inspector case file. Her tone flipped, a deputy on the way. Shadows stirred at the oaks, 2 silhouettes, shovels glinting. My light stabbed out faces I knew, the SUV goons. They froze, bolted, leaping fences, gone. The shallow hole remained, and in it, plastic-wrapped weight. A staged stash, a framed job. My stomach lurched. They meant to plant evidence, force us out, then call it in. Filthy, dangerous tactics. Inside, hands still trembling, I laid it all out to Grandpa. He didn't flinch. Camera 3, he said, pointing at the laptop on backup battery. I clicked. The feed was perfect. Night vision sharp as glass. The trespass, the digging, the package. The panic when my light hit. Proof. When the deputy arrived, bored no longer, we handed him the scene. He called in backup. Forensics, evidence bags sealed with timestamp, photos of the SUV's VINs logged. Cruise confirmed, sabotage meter yanked, curb stop, sword clean. Their fingerprints were everywhere. Betty Brown's board had overreached. The night bloomed red and blue with law enforcement. Grandpa watched through kerosene glow, tea in hand. Sloppy, he said, satisfied. Now they'll bleed for it. Dawn brought restored power and water, but no calm. Police tape in our yard marked where the trap had failed. Patrol car parked firm, property guarded. The air hung thick, waiting. By noon, a paper slapped against our door. Heavy stock, bold. Letters glaring, emergency order of abatement and removal. Legal jargon stacked high. Empty authority trying to crush us. Proof the war had escalated, and the enemy was cornered enough to show its teeth. The so-called official notice was written with words like whereas and hereinafter, dripping with fake authority. It claimed our property posed a clear and present danger to community health and safety, citing a county ordinance that didn't exist. The text accused us of harboring unstable, dangerous trees and non-compliant outbuildings, which I figured was a jab at Grandpa's old shed. But the real kicker was in the final lines. It ordered us to vacate within 24 hours so that an abatement team could step in and fix the supposed hazards. The document was signed by Betty Brown, president of the Creekwood Estates HOA, and co-signed by some guy named Markham, listed as a certified county compliance officer. But it was a sham, a laughably bad forgery if you knew what to look for. The county seal wasn't embossed. It was a pixelated cut and paste from the internet. The ordinance number they cited didn't exist in any record, and the Markham signature, the same handwriting as Betty's, not even disguised. They thought an official-looking seal, some legal-sounding jargon, and a 24-hour ultimatum would be enough to scare us into packing up and running. They weren't trying to follow the law, they were trying to bypass it. They had cooked the thing up on Betty's home printer and thought it would pass. I brought the paper to Grandpa, who was sitting on the porch reading a book on military history. He slid his glasses on, studied the notice, and read it twice over. His face didn't harden with anger, nor did he look surprised. Instead, a slow grin spread across his face. Not a happy grin, a predator's grin. Well, he said, folding the fake order neatly and tapping it against the arm of his chair. This is a gift. He handed the document back like it was a dead animal. His finger tapped the seal. See that eagle? That's a pelican. I squinted. He was right. The text said Pelican County. He chuckled. This county doesn't have pelicans. Then he slipped his phone into his pocket, called Martinez, then the sheriff, then Theo, and put on a fresh pot of coffee, strong. We're going to need it. Plan? I asked. Simple, he replied. Cameras on, porch clean, smiles. Ready, let them hang themselves. It's a forged eviction notice, I said, the words sharp with anger. They're trying to steal our house. It's more than that, Cal, Grandpa answered, his eyes gleaming with a grim kind of satisfaction. Forgery of a government seal, felony. Impersonating a county officer, felony. Attempting to seize property with a fraudulent document, felony. Betty just handed us the rope to hang her with, and he was right. The smashed mailbox was already a federal crime. The planted evidence was a state crime. Now this a forged government document was a whole new level of stupidity. Betty wasn't just a meddling tyrant anymore. She had just crossed into felony territory, with her name at the bottom of the page. What do we do? I asked. We call our friends, Grandpa said simply. And by friends, he didn't mean neighbors, he meant officials. First, I rang up Inspector Martinez from the Postal Service. I explained the forgery, the fake seal, and the bogus compliance officer. I could practically hear him sit straighter at his desk. He asked me to scan and email the notice immediately. Said this escalated the case in a big way. Next, I called the sheriff's office. The detective who'd taken over the file listened carefully, then told me to bring the original document straight to him. He said he'd run the name Markham through their system and check with the county's planning and code enforcement office. Meanwhile, Grandpa made his own call to the state attorney general's office. He had a contact there, a lawyer he knew through a veterans advocacy group working in consumer protection. Grandpa laid out everything: the harassment, the mail tampering, the destroyed utilities, the planted drugs, and now the forged notice. He was connecting the dots, piece by piece, building a broader case. This wasn't just a neighborhood dispute anymore. It was organized criminal activity carried out under the banner of a homeowners association. By the time I hung up with the detective, the air felt different. We weren't on defense anymore. We were feeding evidence into 3 pipelines: the postal inspector, the county sheriff, and the state attorney general. Each held a piece of the puzzle. Fraud, impersonation, conspiracy, all of it was circling back to Betty. She thought she was just bullying an old man and his grandson. In reality, she had declared war on the United States Postal Service, the Sheriff's Department, and the state of North Carolina. I looked down at the paper still in my hand, flimsy, pathetic, but it was the keystone, the proof of intent, the evidence of a conspiracy. Betty had written her own confession. Grandpa gazed out toward the street. "They'll be here soon," he said. "The abatement team?" I asked. He nodded. "What do we do when they show up?" He smiled that same predator smile. "We invite them in for a chat and you, Cal, make sure the camera's rolling. This is going to be an important conversation." The clock was ticking, but it wasn't our deadline anymore. It was hers. Betty Brown just didn't know it yet. The afternoon heat pressed down heavy. The so-called 24-hour deadline was still a few hours away, but they didn't wait. They came early. 2 white panel vans pulled into our drive, both sporting the laughably fake Creekwood Estates compliance and safety logo on the sides. Out of the first van stepped the same 2 thugs who tried to plant drugs on us. Out of the second, 2 more men, also in cheap logo polos. One of them held a clipboard like it made him important. This, I realized, was Markham, the fake county officer. I stood on the porch, Grandpa rocking beside me, looking as if he didn't have a care in the world. My phone was already recording in my pocket, and a second camera was perched on the railing, aimed at the steps. The men strutted up the driveway like they owned the place. Clipboard Markham stopped at the bottom of the steps. Short, thin, with a bad comb-over, he puffed himself up, trying to look tough. It didn't work. "Jack Reynolds," he announced. Grandpa just rocked, silent, eyes fixed on him. Markham cleared his throat, thrown off by the lack of response. "I am Officer Markham with the County Compliance Division. We are here to enforce an emergency abatement order. You need to vacate immediately." I stepped forward. "We're not going anywhere," I said calmly. "And you're not a county officer?" We checked. "There is no Officer Markham in this county." His face flushed, pale pink. He darted a glance at his hired muscle, panic flashing in his eyes. "This is a legal order," he snapped, waving the clipboard. "You're interfering with county authority." "That's a forged document," I shot back, raising my voice for the cameras. "The seal is fake. The ordinance number is fake. Your signature is a forgery. You are impersonating a public official, a felony." The 2 goons shifted uneasily. They weren't thinkers. They were One of them, the same scowling brute from the SUV, rested his hand on the butt of a pistol in his open holster. The gesture wasn't subtle. It was meant to scare. Grandpa stopped rocking. He rose to his feet slowly, hands folding casually behind his back. To anyone else it looked harmless, but I knew better. I knew exactly where his right hand was, wrapped around the grip of his old Colt 1911. The sidearm from 1948 he carried everywhere. It wasn't just habit. It was part of him. Grandpa stepped up beside me, his gaze fixed on the thug with his hand on the pistol. His face was calm, almost unreadable, but his eyes sharp as steel, burned with authority. He looked frail to the untrained eye, but his voice cut the air like a command in combat. "Son," he said evenly, every word carrying the weight of battle-hardened certainty, "take your hand off that weapon. You're standing on my land. You're no officer of the law. And if you draw, I'll treat it as a threat against my life and my grandson's. You will not like what follows." The world seemed to slow, the air dense enough to choke on. The thug's eyes flickered. He saw only an old man in a flannel shirt, but what he heard was a deadly promise. His fingers twitched. His partner shifted uneasily, clearly rattled. This wasn't the scenario they had been sent in for. They expected fear, not a soldier who stared death in the eye without blinking. Then came the mistake, the worst one of his life. The gun slid free from the holster. He didn't aim yet, but he held it at his side, trying to regain control with raw force. Grandpa didn't flinch. His eyes locked onto the man's. I knew what his hands hid behind his back. His finger curled around his own trigger. He was ready. The tension was unbearable, a breath away from violence. Markham, the fake compliance officer, looked sick. "Now, let's all stay calm," he squealed. Too late. The line was already crossed. The thug raised his weapon, leveling it at Grandpa's chest. Grandpa lifted his chin slightly. "Last chance. Gun down. Hands on your head." The bandana swallowed. Theo's booming voice shattered the silence. "Breaking news, folks. Polo shirt here forgot where his brain's safety is." Nervous laughter rippled from porches. Then a deputy's amplified voice thundered from a cruiser down the block. "Drop the weapon. Now." Still, the pistol hovered. And then it shifted. A siren, a real one, racing closer. At the same moment, Theo's voice blasted from a small speaker on our porch. "We are live, cowboys." Whole neighborhoods tuned in and the cavalry seconds away. The thug's composure cracked. His head snapped toward the siren, then back to Grandpa, then toward the voice on the speaker. His brain couldn't keep up. He was just a hired muscle, and he'd pulled a gun on an 82-year-old veteran in front of witnesses and an audience that stretched beyond our street. Confusion melted into panic. He was caught in a trap he never saw. The moment stretched like hot summer air, his gun still pointed, Grandpa's hand still hidden, steady. The siren screaming closer. Then Theo's voice again, wild and electric. "That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Broadcasting courtesy of the Creekwood Unofficial Neighborhood Watch. We've got an underqualified thug pointing steel at Mr. Jack Reynolds, war hero extraordinaire. Somebody get this guy a bad taste citation and a long prison term." Theo was brilliant. My live stream fed to his house over a hidden Wi-Fi link, then rebroadcast across the web and his ham rig. He was a one-man news station. His commentary absurd, hilarious, cutting strip to goons of whatever intimidation they thought they had. Donnie looked lost, lowering the gun an inch as his eyes darted from Grandpa to the sirens to the speaker. "Tell your grandpa to stand tall, Cal," Theo roared. "Man's like the Statue of Liberty, but with grit. Audience is eating it up. We've got listeners in the next county." The effect was instant. Doors swung open up and down Elm Drive. Neighbors stepped onto lawns, phones in hand, watching the stream and the reality unfold together. The isolation Betty banked on. Gone. Witnesses were everywhere. A red pickup screeched to a halt at our drive. Mr. Henderson jumped out, clutching a tire iron, silent but solid, across the street. Mrs. Gable appeared, wielding a garden rake like a spear. Markham paled, panic etched into his face. "Pack it up. Let's go," he squealed, desperation in his voice. Too late. A sheriff's cruiser, lights flashing, blocked the vans. Another rolled up behind. Deputies stepped out, hands on their holsters. "Sheriff's Department." "Drop the weapon," one barked. Donnie froze, trapped. His eyes flickered between Grandpa and the deputies. Finally, the fight drained out of him. He dropped the gun to the pavement, raised his hands high. The rest followed. Grandpa eased his arms forward, empty hands revealed. His Colt never saw daylight, but it didn't need to. That single image, his hands behind his back while a gun aimed at him, was enough. He won the standoff with sheer resolve. That's deputies cuffed the thugs. An unmarked sedan arrived. A man in a suit stepped out, badge on his belt. "Postal Inspector Martinez." He rattled off our original case number, ensuring the trail stayed clean. Walking past the uniforms, he came to the porch. "Mr. Reynolds." "Cow," he said flatly. "I think you've got some property of mine." He meant the men. The vans gave up even more fake badges, counterfeit abatement orders, lists of targeted homes. This wasn't just about us. It was systemic harassment. Theo's voice crowed from the porch speaker. "Ladies and gents, a picture-perfect take. Huge thanks to the Sheriff's Office and the United States Postal Inspection Service. Let's hear it for Jack and Cal Reynolds for standing tall." Applause rippled across lawns. Neighbors smiled. Some were thumbs up. The fear Betty thrived on was dissolving. Markham, sweating and pale, tried babbling excuses to a deputy. Pathetic. Grandpa lowered himself into his rocking chair. He looked weary, but satisfied. He had stared down a gun on his own porch, defended home and family with unshakable nerve. He had faced the abyss, and the abyss blinked. The immediate fight was done, but Betty Brown was still 2 doors down, watching her empire crumble. Her army crushed, her scheme in tatters. The Battle of Elm Drive was ours, but Creekwood Estate still waited. And with the evidence we had and allies now at our side, I knew we had the ammunition to finish the war. The livestream had been the master trick. It turned a private standoff into a public reckoning. It showed truth in real time, and truth set us free. The atmosphere shifted, neighbors buzzing, voices alive, fear gone. The enemy wasn't terrifying anymore. They were just weak men in bad polos. But even as deputies led the cuffed goons away, something darker appeared. "Sarge, a young deputy called, holding up a gym bag from the van. The sergeant and Martinez approached. The zipper came down inside, were clear baggies of white powder. A classic setup. I saw Donnie's smug smile as his eyes slid toward us. Their backup plan was clear. Frame us, claim the bag was ours, tossed in the chaos. Their word against ours. Dirty, desperate. But Grandpa and I had our own contingency. Now, I said loudly, flip the switch. Grandpa pressed the hidden toggle. In an instant, the house blazed with light industrial floodlights, turning the yard into a stadium. A piercing siren wailed, rattling teeth. Neighbors gasped, deputies flinched. The goons cowered. "What the hell is that?" the sergeant shouted. "Our idiot repellent," I shot back. "Check the porch camera feed." He did. Footage showed the second thug slipping the bag into the van after arriving, crystal clear. The sergeant's jaw tightened. He turned to the cuffed men, disgust heavy in his voice. "Looks like you boys just added false evidence and distribution charges. Congratulations, you've hit the jackpot." Donnie's color drained, his last trace of bravado gone. But the night wasn't finished. Another car rolled up, a modest sedan. Out stepped Brenda, the HOA treasurer, clutching a manila envelope like a lifeline, nervous but determined. "I need to speak to whoever's in charge," she said, voice shaking but steadying with each word. Martinez stepped forward. "I'm with the Postal Inspection Service. What do you have?" Brenda drew in a breath, clutching the envelope tighter. "I'm the HOA treasurer, and Betty Mrs. Brown has been cooking the books for months." She pulled out a thick manila envelope, her hand trembling but steady enough. "These are the real ledgers," she said. "She's been siphoning our dues to bankroll these thugs." She labeled it as security upgrades and community beautification. "Uniforms, vans, weapons, it's all in here. Over $50,000. The crowd gasped, realization cutting deep. Their own hard-earned money had been twisted into funding the very intimidation they'd endured. Under the glare of floodlights, the picture-sharpened exposed henchmen, planted drugs, and now a treasurer holding the receipts. A portrait of corruption collapsing in real time. Theo's voice broke over the speaker again, like a showman calling. "The finale. And we have a defector, folks." The treasurer just flipped. "This isn't TV, this is live." Inspector Martinez slid the envelope open, scanning a few sheets before locking eyes with the sheriff's sergeant. The sergeant's nod was grave. This wasn't suspicion anymore, it was proof. Paper trails tying Betty Brown directly to every dirty play. Fake credentials, contraband, tactical gear, vans all bought with community funds. Grandpa leaned in close, whispering with a quiet pride. "Chess, not checkers. They played with force, we played with patience." Step by step, they cornered themselves. The floodlights stayed harsh, illuminating the crumbling empire of a woman who thought she could rule unchecked. Brenda's arrival was a spark to dry tinder. Martinez and the sergeant didn't hesitate. The invoices, the falsified minutes, the security consultants exposed as hired muscle, everything screamed organized crime. The sergeant radioed up the chain. Not just another deputy, he called his captain, who looped in the district attorney. This wasn't neighborhood drama anymore. This was racketeering. Brenda, her burden lifted, gave a full statement right there, on the curb. Neighbors edged closer, voices low but urgent, confessing their own stories, fines, threats, punishments for trivial violations. It became clear we weren't her only prey, just the only ones who'd pushed back. I glanced toward the Oaks and saw Grandpa with Theo. No rocking chair now, just quiet strategy, instructions passing between them like another chess move laid on the board by the time an hour passed. The thugs were cuffed and gone, vans documented, evidence bagged. The block hummed with a strange mix of outrage and unity. Then came the real wave. Silver and blue state troopers, unmarked sedans with government plates. Authority lined our street. Betty's house went dark. Lights cut as if she could disappear into shadow. Futile. A man in a suit stepped out, flanked by troopers, carrying calm authority in every step. Martinez handed him the envelope. Davenport, from the Attorney General's office. He already had warrants ready, signed minutes ago by a judge. This was the hammer. He strode to Betty's door, warrant in hand, voice commanding. "Betty Brown, open the door. We have a warrant for your arrest and to search the premises." Silence. Then the ram hit wood, splintered flashlights carved the dark. Cry rang. Ought. And then Betty, dragged into the night in cuffs, her hair wild, pajamas wrinkled, pride shattered. She spotted us, eyes burning, shrieked, "You ruined everything." Grandpa didn't flinch. Silence was enough. The neighbors didn't cheer. They didn't cheer. They just watched as years of fear dissolved into the night. Davenport handed Grandpa a card, thanked him for his service Vietnam, and now this. His words carried weight. The HOA itself would be dissolved, its covenants stripped, its dues erased. Not just Betty gone, but the rotten structure with her. What followed was swift justice. Embezzlement, mail fraud, impersonation, racketeering. Betty faced them all and lost. Prison, not parole. Her officers faced weapons charges and conspiracy counts. The HOA was dismantled, placed in receivership, then wiped clean. For the first time in years, neighbors breathed free. Henderson's white picket fence went up. Theo's antennas stayed. Kids laughed in open yards. The silence of fear was replaced by conversation, by pies, by six-packs, by thanks on our lawn. Grandpa studied the oaks Betty wanted felled, still standing, roots deep, branches high. Good people, he murmured. They just needed reminding. He had fought with patience, law, and proof. And one dot, the sun dipped low, warmth spilling across the street reborn. Laughter carried. For once, it felt like a neighborhood. Home was safe. The oak still grew. Grandpa lifted his binoculars toward the horizon, watching the light shift, already scanning the next move.